Bruchim Abayim, good morning, Morai Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Makkot, and we are on Daf Chaf Gimel Amud Bet, the bottom of the Amud, 4 lines up from the bottom. Darash Rabbi Simlai, today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut for Refuah Shlema av Rachel Simcha Bad Nahid, should have full recovery, Refuah Shlema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Also for Refuah Shlema of Uziel ben Hana, that should also have full recovery, Refuah Shlema. Operation should go well, Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. This month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Shei family, the Cohen family, and Dayan families. It should be an ultimate zchut for all their mishpachot, Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Now we have a fantastic, all-time famous Gemara over here. Amar Rabbi Simlai. Says the Gemara, Darash Rabbi Simlai, 613 mitzvot ne'emru lo leMoshe. We have 613 mitzvot in the Torah. You know where we get 613 mitzvot? Right over here. This is the Makor, right? Now there's fair amount of machloket what exactly the 613 are. It's one of my pet peeves that aside from the existence of Hashem and the fact that Hashem is Echad, pretty much everything else in Yiddishkeit is a machloket, right? And this is not one of the ones that is an exception. Rambam, Rav Sadia Gaon, many moneh mitzvot, they disagree about certain count of mitzvot, but we all come from this Gemara that there is 613 mitzvot in subtotal. Another anecdote that's important, you have to realize that that does not mean that there are only 613 mitzvot that are deoraita. There are many, many, many more mitzvot that are deoraita. They're not counted as the number of the mitzvot. Rambam, for instance, in the beginning of his Sefer HaMitzvot, he has different shorashim, different laws as general rules of what you count and what you don't count as mitzvah d'oraita. And of course, many of them are the level of a biblical mitzvah, but they're just not counted as one of the mitzvot out of the number of 613. And that is not just the Rambam. This is a universally agreed upon item that there are many mitzvot d'oraita, that they are level of a biblical commandment of either a commandment or a prohibition, but nevertheless, they're not counted as the 613. Now, how do we know this? Says the Gemara, 365 lavin. There are 365 don't use the lavin, kiminyan imot hachama. They're the number of the days of the solar calendar. And 248 of them, there are positive mitzvot that are keneged evarav shel adam, corresponding to the number of a person's limbs, which again, this becomes a much bigger concept, that it's not just 365 days of the year, but there's also the sinews of a person's body. So you have 248 limbs, 365 sinews, right? The evarim and the gidim, which comprise basically a body of a person is comprised from, and that is the evarim haruchanim, like Rab Chaim Vital writes as well. They correspond together, not just happens to be like that, but rather the world has been created from the Torah. The famous words of Zohar HaKadosh, Istakel be'oraita ubara alma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked at the Torah as a blueprint to the world. So therefore, any component that the world has comes from a component in the Torah. So the 300, and a human being is a olam katan. It's a small universe. So it's not a coincidence that you have exactly corresponding number of sinews and limbs to mitzvot aseh u'mitzvot lo ta'aseh. Says the Gemara, Amar Rab Hamnuna, Ma'ikra, how do you learn that we have 613 mitzvot? Because it's very simple, it's straightforward. Torah siva lanu Moshe. Moshe commanded us Torah. What is the Gematria of Torah? 611. We know that the two of the first commandments out of the Aseret Dibrot we heard directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? We heard this directly from the from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Nevuah to Klal Yisrael of Nevuah Panim El Panim, and then they basically asked him to stop, and Moshe Rabbeinu transmitted the rest of the Torah to them. So Torah Sivalanu Moshe, 611 mitzvot we heard from Moshe. Torah begimatria shit me'ave chatzari have. There are 611. Anochi velo yelecha mipia gevura shemanum. We heard the first two mitzvot from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, just a very interesting point that I want to put there as a question. If you take a look in the way Aseret HaDibrot are written in the Chumash, right? This is a question, especially for Chazalim, that they, the Baalei Koreh, that they pay attention to these things. If you pay attention, both in Parashat Yitro and in Parashat Vayetchanan, that Aseret HaDibrot is mentioned, there is an order in the way it is written with Tam Elyon. We read the Chumash with a specific, by Aseret HaDibrot, the specific tune of its own. It has its own ta'amim. It has its own way of reading, where the pasuk starts, where the pasuk ends. And if you pay attention, the difference is that every one of the dibrot is one pasuk by itself. Whereas, for instance, in the psukim, the way we have it printed in the Chumash, mitzvav, zachoret yom HaShabbat, or shamarot yom HaShabbat, it's 4 psukim. It's a long, long paragraph. It's 4 psukim. You know how many psukim it is when you read it b'tam elyon? 1 pasuk. 1 very long pasuk. But 1 pasuk. I urge you to actually open the Chumash and take a look at it today. And by the way, the short mitzvot lo ta'aseh in the second luach, right? Lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignov. How many psukim are those? Right, all 3 of them are 1 pasuk. Guess what it is in Tam Elyon? Each one of them is 1 pasuk. Lo tirtzach, lo tinach, lo tignov. Every one of them is a pasuk by itself, because every dibra was separate for itself, and Tam Elyon represents that which was said in Har Sinai. We are reliving and re-experiencing Ma'amad Har Sinai. So whatever was said as one thing, we experience it in Kriyat Torah Betzibur as one thing. Whatever was 2 or 3 things, we experience it as 2 or 3. Hence, Shabbat is 1 dibra, so we experience it as 1 dibra, 1 long paragraph. And each one of the lotinaf, lotignov, you know, the lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignov, each one of them is 1 pasuk. Therefore, we experience it like that in the tzibur, right? That's amazing, right? It is an amazing. It's something that people don't think about. Why do we have Tam Elyon? Why Tam Tachto? But that's it. Now, this is amazing until you pay attention to the first and the last of the Aseret HaDibrot. Because guess how many psukim are Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. How many psukim is that? I see some people are actually looking in the Chumash. 1 pasuk, right? That is 1 pasuk. So what we translate as being the first and the second commandment, really in Tam Elyon is written as 1 pasuk, right? So your homework is to find out why exactly is it. But it's clear in the Gemara, right, that this is Shnayim. There's 2 mitzvot, right? Can you say it's 2 mitzvot in 1 dibra? Not so gishmak, right? So that's a homework to work on. Not no one could sleep tonight, you know. What? כן, אבל זה 2 mitzvot, 2 dibrot pashtud, right? The Gemara seems to say that this is 2 dibrot. Certainly we relate to them as the first and the second dibra, right? but at the same time, it hits a brick wall when you think about the explanation that we just gave based on Tam Elyon and how to understand this. Again, the same thing would be, the opposite of it would apply to the last Dibra as well. I'll leave that up to you to take a look and enjoy. Says the Gemara, therefore, Anochi velo yeh lecha mipi hagivura shemanum. Those two we heard directly mipi hagivura. Fine. Now, this is 613 that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, by Moshe Rabbeinu to us. But now the Gemara says, throughout their generations, there were times that Klal Yisrael encapsulated the importance of those mitzvot in some of the fundamental mitzvot that the rest of the Torah rests on, and it's like a building with the pillars that everything stands on. And it's not to say that they summarized the mitzvot, they said keep these 11 and the rest of it you're fine, chas v'shalom. Of course not, right? But what are the fundamental mitzvot that the entire binyan, the entire structure of the Torah rests on and leans on? What are the pillars of this? Says the Gemara, Ba David ve'emidan al achad esre. David HaMelech comes along and he summarizes the fundamental principles of the Torah in 11. Dichtiv, as it says, Mizmor le David. This is a beautiful, beautiful pasuk. The entire Mizmor is fantastic, but says David HaMelech, and we'll count this together in Tehillim Tetvav, says the Tehillim, Mizmor David, Hashem mi agur ba'olecha. Who is going to live in your tents? Mishkon ba'ar kodshecha. Who could dwell in your holy mountain? Meaning, who is going to be a person that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could reach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, could attach himself to Hashem. Holech tamim u'po'el sedek. A person that goes with timimut, po'el sedek, he does tzedakah, v'dover emet bilvavo, he speaks the truth in his heart. 3. Lo ragal al leshono, he does not speak negatively. Lo asa lere'ehu ra'ah, he does not do bad to people. 5. V'cherpa lo nasa al kirovo. 6. Nibze be'enav nim'as. 7. Ve'ed yireh Hashem yichabed, respects the ones who are God-fearing. 8. Nishba le'ara ve'lo yamir, he hates those people who are, who are negative. We'll see what that means exactly in the Gemara. Kasvo lo natan beneshech. That's 10. V'shochad al naki lo lakach, and he does not accept bribe to tilt a judgment. That's 11. Ose'ele lo imot lo'olam. A person that does these will never fall down. So says the Gemara, that's the full pasuk. Holech tamim, says the Gemara, ze Avraham. This is Avraham Avinu. Tichtiv hitalech lefanai ve'yeh tamim. Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, walk in front of me and be tamim, be with simplicity. Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha is a mitzvah in the Torah, right? Rashi says, Lo tiyeh acharei atidot. Don't have a lot of cheshbonot. Don't have a lot of calculations. Like the pasuk says, Shlomo Melech, Ha'elohim bara et ha'adam yashar. Hashem has created human being straight. Vehem ha'bikshu cheshbonot rabim. They seek out a lot of complexities in their lives. That means we make it difficult sometimes with making a lot of heshbonot. So Hashem says, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. Hitalech lefanai ve'yeh tamim. Avraham Avinu was the first one that was commanded to be tamim like that. Po'el sedek. What does it mean, po'el sedek? Does tzedakah? Kegon Abba Chilkiyahu. This is like the famous story of Abba Chilkiyahu, that he was so honest. He was so honest that when he would work, he was a worker, And when he was working, if you went to him and said Shalom Aleichem, he would not answer you. For that one word answering Aleichem Shalom, or just Shalom, it's geza, stealing from your balabayit, from the one that you're working for. The honesty, integrity of work, right? The work ethics and being honest. That you learn from Abba Chilkiyahu. Dover emet bilvavo. What's dover emet bilvavo? Says the Gemara, Kegon Rav Safra. What's the story of Rav Safra? Again, each one of these is a reference to a story that happened. This is in Sheil Tot Rab Achai Gaon. It's brought in Parashat Vayechi, in Sheil Talamed Vav, story of Rav Safra, that one time he needed to sell something, right? And a person came to actually buy it from him. But there was one problem. Rav Safra was in the middle of saying Shema. So when you're saying Shema, you can't talk. When you're saying Shema, according to the Gemara in Masechet Yuma Daf Yutet, you're not supposed to be hinting something to someone. You've seen people who are saying benching, and they're running the whole household from the benching table. That's what are you trying to do? I never forget, I was in a certain shul in a certain city, not mentioning any details, and the Hazan, this is actually a religious shul, the Hazan gets a phone call in middle of Shomona Esrei, right? In the middle of Shomona Esrei, he gets a phone call. I give him the benefit of the doubt. Probably someone was dying or his wife was giving birth. So he picked up the phone in the middle of Shomona Esrei. Everyone is quiet, and he delivered the entire conversation with the whole conversation for about 30 seconds until he hung up the phone, right? That would be mutar if it's pikuach nefesh, right? Short of that, you don't want to do that. So Rav Safra is sitting there saying Shema. This guy says, Chacham, I buy it for $50. En kol ve'en kashiv. Nothing. He's saying Shema. Right? So the guy thought that he was so not happy with the price that he didn't even react. So he started negotiating against himself. So okay, $100. Right? Nothing. Right? $200. He went up and up until he finished Shema. I don't know where he was holding by then. And Safra says, I'll sell it. So he takes out $500 to pay. He says, no. When you said $50 in the beginning, in my mind, I was okay with that. It's not emet if I charge you more. That's dover emet. He didn't say anything. He didn't say, okay, 50 and then renege on the thing. But in his heart, he agreed with it. It says, dover emet, that's the Gemara says, that's dover emet bilbavo. A person that is so truthful that he himself is the barometer of his truth. Not because you hold him against his words, but because it is something in his heart. It's something that he lives by as a barometer of his midot. So,
the whole Shema you're not supposed to speak through?
Say it again?
Is it the whole Shema you're not supposed to interrupt in any way, or is it just
the whole Shema? The whole Shema. Certainly, the first psukim are more important. We spoke about this when we did Siman Nun Chet through Pechet. We did in Shcharuch the halachot of Kriyat Shema. Because Kriyat Shema, so we spoke about the fact that the Shema itself, Baruch Shem, and the first two psukim perhaps are more important. The first pasha is more important than second pasha, and so on and so forth. There are a hierarchy of kavanah and respect that you have to have for it. But nevertheless, throughout the tefillah, a person should not be speaking. Like, once I have the shofar, I could blow more, says the Gemara. You have people who are from people, and they don't know or have not been taught properly that you cannot speak during tefillah. And during tefillah means, at the very least, from the moment you start Baruch Shamar until the end of Chazarat Shaliach Tzibur, and if you have a regular weekday until the end of Nefilat Apayim. Asur, you cannot speak. In the middle of Chazar Shas, you can't speak. The Shcharuch says in Siman Kuf Chav Dalet, Gadol avono mineso. If a person speaks in the duration of Chazarat Shas, his avon is so chamur, So unforgivable. One of the only times that you have this mentioned in Chazal, these heavy language of Gadol Avono Mineso, right? You can't speak. You see on Shabbat, people, some people must not know that they think they're ahead of the Tefillah in Psukei de Zimra, and they when someone comes to them, they speak. You're not supposed to speak in the middle of Psukei de Zimra. You're not supposed to speak in the middle of Tefillah at all. You know, from the beginning of Baruch Shamar until the end of Chazarat HaShas on Shabbat, and the end of Tachanun on Monday, Thursdays, a person is not supposed to speak, or on regular weekdays until the end of Ledavid, until the end of Nefilat HaPayim. So says the Gemara, that is what it means, Dover Emet Bilvavo, someone like Rav Safra. Now, says the Gemara, one more, let's do one more. Lo ragala leshono, ze Yaakov Avinu, right? That's a person that's like that Yaakov Avinu. He wants to also be so truthful because he says, Ulai yemusheni avi, ve'aiti be'enav kim tateya. What does that mean? When Yaakov Avinu was instructed by Rivka, by his mother, to go get the brachot, and he said, I know your father's going to be giving the bracha of Gashmir, the bracha of prosperity in this world to your brother Esav, and I know that you're the one fit for this. And Beruach HaKodesh was told to me that you should be the one to get it. It says, Lord Agarash, he didn't want to lie. He says, I can't do it. The man says, I'm telling you to do it. He says, I can't. Because maybe my father is going to, the depth of this Gemara, I'll explain to you based on some of the Mefarshim that say a fantastic, magnificent insight into Lashon HaTorah. There is a difference between pen and ulai in Lashon HaTorah, right? Pen means lest. Ulai also means lest. But you know what the difference is? Pen is a language of something that you absolutely don't want to happen. Right? Pen ifteh levavchem, lest your hearts would be tricked. Chas v'shalom. I don't want that to happen. Ulai is something that you are wishing to happen. You want it to happen, right? Maybe both of them are maybe, but one of them is maybe ochan vei vav veila, and the other one is maybe im Hashem, amen ken yeh ratzon ken yomar Hashem, right? What language does Yaakov have to use when he is afraid that his father may touch him and realize that he is really not Esav, but he's really Yaakov? He should use pen, right? He should be using pen, absolutely. But he uses ulai. Why? Because he's so truthful. He's so true. He says, you know, I kind of want it to be coming out the truth. Because being a truthful person, not wanting to lie, is such a midah of emet. Titen emet leYaakov, Hesed leAvraham. Midah of Avraham Avinu Chesed, midah of Yaakov Avinu is emet, right? By the way, that's why he's tikkun. Each one of the avot, their tikkun is to live with the opposite of their midah, right? That's the tikkun. Sometimes a person says, "Oh, my wife, my boss, my this, my kid," right? Sometimes Hashem puts a person into test, and that is exactly what the person has to go through. 20 years he had to live with the greatest trickster of all time, Lavan Arami, right? And the Emet had to live with Sheker for 20 years, right? And so is with every single one of the personalities in Tanakh. I once gave a long shiur on going through one by one, each one of the Avot and Imahot and the great personalities of Tanakh, how their tikkun was to live with exactly the diametric opposed midah that they carried with themselves. But that, again, is Yaakov Avinu will stop here.